The air in the operations tent was thick with tension. The mission briefing had gone from confident to chaotic in minutes. Intelligence reports showed enemy reinforcements moving faster than expected, convoys of technicals and armored transports flooding into the valley that cut between the ridgelines. The SEAL team had boots on the ground, pinned near the southern ridge. Extraction wasn't just urgent, it was almost impossible. Commander Rourke slammed his palm against the map table. Damn it, we need a pilot who can fly under radar, through that storm, and land in an LZ that barely exists. His team exchanged uneasy looks. Outside, thunder rolled, shaking the aluminum walls. Every pilot in their usual rotation was either grounded by the storm, rerouted, or already flying medevac elsewhere. A young lieutenant hesitated before speaking. "Sir, what about the standby personnel from Delta Base? They've got one transport chopper unassigned." Rourke barked, "Then call their pilot." A runner sprinted through the tent's flaps, disappearing into the rain. Radios crackled. Outside, engines groaned to life. But minutes later, the runner returned, helmet dripping, face pale. "Sir, Delta's pilot isn't reporting in. They said, they've got someone else taking the seat." "Someone else?" Rourke growled. "Who authorized that?" The runner hesitated, then motioned toward the tent's entrance. And she walked in. She wasn't wearing a flight suit, just standard fatigues, soaked, sleeves rolled to her elbows, a flight badge clipped carelessly on her chest. Her hair was tied back, eyes calm and unreadable. She didn't salute immediately, didn't explain herself. She just stood there for a heartbeat, watching the chaos with an expression that belonged to someone who'd seen far worse. Rourke eyed her with irritation. "Who the hell are you?" She stepped forward. "Call sign, Hawk 01. You called for a combat pilot." The tent went silent. Radios still hissed, but no one spoke. Rourke blinked. "Hawk 01, he half laughed. "That's a ghost tag. The last record with that call sign was scrubbed 5 years ago." Her reply was quiet but unflinching. "That's because I was flying it." Someone near the back whispered, "No way." Rourke crossed his arms. "You're telling me you're the Hawk who flew the Kuna Ridge evac? The one who went dark behind enemy lines?" She gave a small nod. "I came back. They just didn't update the files." The commander stared at her like he was looking at a living legend. The Kuna Ridge evac was a classified black op where 2 teams were extracted under missile fire, through a sandstorm, after the pilot had been reported shot down. Nobody knew how that pilot survived, or if they really had. "You're saying you can fly through that?" Rourke said, pointing to the thunderstorm raging outside. "With half the radar down and no escort?" Her tone didn't change. "I don't need an escort. Just a flight path and a target grid." The radio operator frowned. "Ma'am, the weather conditions are catastrophic. Visibility's less than 50 meters. No navigation instruments can hold stable that low." She looked over, calm as stone. "Then we won't use instruments." A few SEALs chuckled nervously, thinking she was joking. But she didn't even smile. Rourke studied her face for a moment longer, then gestured toward the map. "Show me how you'd run it." She stepped to the table, glancing over the terrain data once. Her fingers traced a route that wasn't on any of the marked flight paths, through a canyon too narrow for most pilots to risk. "Follow the storm's backdraft here," she said, "it'll mask engine heat. Drop altitude to 50 feet above terrain and ride the thermal pocket along the eastern cliff wall. We'll slip under radar and come in blind. Extraction in 2 minutes, no comms." Rourke shook his head. "That's suicide. Only if you fly scared," she said. That silence returned, thicker now. Rourke's jaw flexed. "And you're sure you can pull it off?" She finally smiled, just barely. "I already have." Minutes later, the storm swallowed the landing strip. The helicopter, an MH-60 modified for stealth ops, roared to life, rotors slapping sheets of rain aside. The crew chief climbed aboard, doing a double take when he saw who was in the pilot seat. "Wait, you're flying?" he asked, shouting over the noise. She just lowered her visor. "Buckle in." Inside the tent, Rourke watched the radar feed flicker as the bird lifted off, then vanish completely into the storm. He exhaled slowly. "God help them," someone muttered. But high above the valley, amid lightning flashes and black wind, Hawk 01 was already threading the needle, tilting the helicopter sideways between canyon walls that looked like jagged knives. Her co-pilot swallowed hard, staring at the altimeter spinning uselessly. "We're flying blind," he shouted. "Not blind," she corrected. "Just ahead of the storm." The chopper dipped so low that rain blasted through the open side door. Her hands were steady, Her eyes fixed on the invisible horizon, flying by instinct, by sound, vibration, and the faint echo of rotors against the canyon's shape. Below, tracer fire lit up the cliffs. Enemy gunners had spotted movement. The gunner swung his M240 toward the flashes and returned fire, his voice cracking over the comms. Taking hits. Port side. She didn't flinch. Brace for wind shift. A gust slammed them sideways, but instead of fighting it, she rolled into it, using the force to pivot around the ridge. The maneuver threw everyone sideways in their harnesses. Her co-pilot screamed, "You just inverted us." "Correction," she said, leveling out just as a missile whooshed past their tail. "I just saved your life." When the radar finally pinged their destination, the SEAL team below was already signaling with infrared strobes, barely holding position under enemy fire. She flared the chopper at the last possible second, skidding onto a mud slope that wasn't even flat enough to qualify as a landing zone. The side door slammed open and the SEALs piled in, one carrying a wounded man. "Holy hell," one of them gasped. "Who's flying this thing?" Their team leader grinned through the rain. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." As they lifted off, rounds pinging against the fuselage, she banked the helicopter so close to the cliff that the co-pilot closed his eyes. When they burst through the storm wall into clear sky, the radio came alive again, Rourke's voice breaking through static. 01, this is command. Report status. She clicked her mic, calm and steady. Package secured. Returning home. The line was silent for a moment. Then Rourke's voice came back, low and odd. "Welcome back, Hawk." She smiled faintly, rain still dripping from her visor. "Didn't think I ever left." The crew looked at her in stunned silence, realizing they weren't flying with just a pilot. They were flying with a legend who had come back from the dead, and she'd just done it again. When the helicopter thundered back through the storm, the entire forward operating base seemed to hold its breath. The radar screens flickered with static, and for several long minutes, no one in the tent dared to speak. Commander Rourke stood with his fists clenched on the edge of the operations table, eyes fixed on the monitor that refused to show anything but noise. Then, through the crackle, a faint blip appeared, low altitude, unstable, but moving. The operator shouted, "Contact. Bearing 187, she's coming in hot." Rourke exhaled, sharply and muttered, "She actually did it." Outside, the wail of rotors grew louder until the tent itself trembled. Soldiers rushed out to the landing zone, shielding their faces against the rain as the black helicopter dropped from the clouds like a ghost returning from the dead. Mud sprayed across the deck as it slammed down, tail swinging to the side, engines still roaring. The moment the side door slid open, SEALs poured out, dragging a wounded man between them. Medics were already sprinting forward, shouting for stretchers. The team looked battered, soaked, but alive, every last one of them. The crew chief stumbled out behind them, his helmet half crooked, eyes wide with disbelief. Rourke was already striding toward the chopper when the pilot climbed out. She pulled off her helmet, rain plastering her hair to her face, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. Not out of pride, more out of quiet relief that everyone had made it back. Rourke stopped in front of her, staring for a long moment. "That was the most insane extraction I've ever seen. Half the base thought you'd crashed." She shrugged lightly. "Half the base was almost right. You realize you just flew through terrain we've been told is unflyable." Her expression didn't change. Terrain doesn't kill pilots. Hesitation does. He laughed once, shaking his head, then gestured toward the tent. "Come inside. You're debriefing before you disappear again." Inside the operations tent, the lights flickered as the generator struggled against the storm. The surviving SEALs sat wrapped in blankets, exhaustion etched deep in their faces. The wounded man was already being stabilized. Rourke poured 2 cups of black coffee and slid one toward her. "So," he said, leaning on the table, "why the hell isn't your name on any roster?" She stared down at the steam curling from the cup. "Because I asked for it to be erased." Rourke frowned. "Nobody just erases themselves from the Navy. You either get forced out or buried." "I wasn't forced out," she said softly. "And I didn't die. I just stopped existing for a while." He didn't push immediately. Instead, he tapped the folder lying unopened on the table. "You know, after you lifted off, I had command dig through classified archives. Took 3 different codes just to unlock your flight record. You really are Hawk 01. The pilot who flew the Kuna Ridge evac." She didn't react. "The report said you saved 2 teams, 41 lives, after being hit by ground fire and losing hydraulics." Then your bird vanished from radar for 18 minutes. When you reappeared, you were already flying home. Rourke's voice lowered. They said you shouldn't have survived that. Her gaze remained steady. Maybe I didn't. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the thunder rolled again, shaking the tent poles. Finally, she said quietly, after Kuna, I was grounded. Too much attention. Too many questions about how I pulled it off. They thought I'd been compromised, or worse. I asked for a transfer, but instead, they shelved me. So I walked. Rourke tilted his head. Walked into what? Black Division flights. No insignia. No records. We ran missions that didn't exist. When it ended, so did our names. He nodded slowly, piecing it together. And when Delta Base needed a pilot, they called everyone but me, she said with a faint smile. So I volunteered myself. Across the tent, one of the SEALs, a young corporal with a bandaged arm, lifted his head. Ma'am, he said, voice rough. If you hadn't come, we'd be dead out there. She gave him a nod, humble, almost uncomfortable with the praise. You held the perimeter until I arrived. That's what kept you alive. Rourke leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. You know, people like you make my job impossible. You ignore orders, rewrite flight protocols, and scare the hell out of everyone who watches you work. But you also do the impossible every damn time. She glanced up at him, one eyebrow raised. Is that your way of saying thank you? He smirked. It's the closest you'll get from me. The radio on the table suddenly crackled to life. Command to Foxtrot Base, confirm status on Hawk 01. Rourke pressed the transmit. She's right here. Mission successful. All personnel accounted for. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, lower, uncertain. Copy that, sir. Command's requesting her immediate report. Priority clearance level red. Rourke looked at her. They don't call level red unless the brass wants answers fast. She gave a small sigh. They always do, but they never listen to them. The tent quieted again. The rain softened to a steady drizzle. The SEALs, one by one, began to drift out toward the barracks, leaving only her, Rourke, and the hum of equipment. Finally, Rourke said, you know, the younger pilots, they talk about Hawk 01 like she's a myth. Some think you were an AI program that flew itself. Others say you went rogue after Kuna. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's better than the truth. And what's the truth? That sometimes you have to disappear to keep doing the right thing, she said. People like me, we don't fit in the reports. We don't look good on recruitment posters. Rourke studied her in silence, then finally said, you're not disappearing again. Not after this. You've just proved we still need pilots like you. She looked past him, out through the tent flap where the rain still fell. Her voice was calm, but there was a distance in it, as though she already knew she wouldn't stay. You'll have plenty of pilots. You don't need ghosts. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, the radio operator burst back in. Sir, command's requesting immediate comms patch for Hawk 01, encrypted line. Rourke motioned toward the headset. She hesitated, then took it. A voice crackled through, older, measured, and unmistakably high-ranking. 01, you've been off the grid too long. We need you back in the air. Priority Alpha mission, coordinates incoming. She didn't even look surprised. You tracked me this whole time. The voice replied, we never stopped. She lowered the headset and looked at Rourke. Looks like the quiet's over. He frowned. You sure you want to step back into their game? You could vanish for good this time. She gave that same faint smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. Commander, I already did. I'm just passing through. Then she turned and walked out into the rain, helmet under her arm, boots sinking into the mud with each step. The thunder rolled again, softer this time, fading into the distance as the rotors began to spin once more. Rourke watched from the doorway as the helicopter lifted off, rising into the storm without lights, without a signal. The men nearby paused to watch too, silent as the dark shape vanished into the clouds. Someone finally spoke. Sir, where's she going? Rourke's gaze stayed fixed on the sky. Where she always goes, he said quietly. Where no one else can. The storm swallowed the last echo of the rotors, and the field went still again. Only the rain remained, falling softly over the base, washing away the mud, as though she'd never been there at all.